You know that uneasy feeling before facing something painful, when your instincts whisper that a harsh truth is about to surface? That's how I felt standing at my mother's funeral. My heart was crushed by grief, yet there was an odd calm inside me as I prepared for who was about to walk in. It had been 7 long years since my sister, Odora, took away Darius, my fiancé, my dream, and the man I believed was my future. I hadn't seen either of them since that day, but when they finally entered the church, Odora flashing her oversized diamond ring and that familiar, self-satisfied smile, she had no idea what was waiting for her. And the look on her face when she discovered who I'd married was unforgettable. My mother was always the heart of our family, the one who held everyone together. Growing up in our small home just outside Boston, she taught me the values of strength, grace, and self-respect. Our bond only grew stronger over time. Even after I moved to my apartment in downtown Boston to start my career as a marketing executive, I spoke to her almost every day. She was my guide, my comfort, and my biggest supporter. So when she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 8 months ago, my world shattered completely. Despite the treatments, we knew her time was limited. But she handled everything with quiet bravery, worrying more about us than herself. Her last days were spent peacefully in the same house where we grew up, surrounded by family. She passed away holding my hand, whispering that one day I would find peace again. 6 years before that moment, when I was 31, life looked good on the surface. A stable job, loyal friends, and a lovely apartment. But something was missing. I was working over 60 hours a week, dating occasionally, yet nothing serious ever came from it. Then, one day, through my college friend Alina, I met Darius Rowan at a charity gala. Darius was everything you'd expect in a success story: confident, charismatic, and effortlessly charming. At 37, he had built his digital business empire from the ground up and was the kind of man magazines love to feature. From the start, we clicked. We both loved art, travel, and ambition. After our first date at an elegant seaside restaurant, I called my mom, thrilled. "Mom, I met someone really special," I told her. Our relationship moved quickly. Weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, symphony nights, exclusive dinners. Darius was thoughtful and generous, constantly planning surprises and buying gifts. 16 months later, he proposed with a 6-carat diamond ring during a private yacht dinner in Boston Harbor. I said yes without hesitation. My parents were overjoyed, especially my mom, who immediately started planning the wedding. With Darius's wealth, she insisted that nothing be spared. Then there was my younger sister, Odora, just 2 years apart. But we had always had a complicated bond. We were close growing up, yet she constantly competed with me for friends, praise, and attention. If I achieved something, she had to outdo it. Mom tried to balance things by giving us individual attention. Despite our history, I chose Odora as my maid of honor. Mom thought it might bring us closer, and I wanted to believe that we'd grown beyond childish rivalry. When I introduced her to Darius during a family dinner, she showered him with compliments. I noticed her touching his arm and laughing a little too warmly, but I brushed it off as her usual flirtatious nature. Our engagement party was held at my parents' colonial-style home. Odora helped with decorations, stringing fairy lights and arranging flowers. I caught her watching Darius several times, but whenever I looked her way, she just smiled and raised her glass. Later, while cleaning up, Mom quietly said, "Wendy dear, your sister seems quite fond of Darius." "She's just being friendly, Mom," I said, rinsing glasses. "Besides, she's dating that pharmaceutical rep, Edric." Mom nodded, but she didn't seem convinced. "Be careful, honey. You know how your sister gets when she wants something." I laughed it off, kissed her cheek, and said, "We're adults now. She's happy for me." I couldn't have been more wrong. 3 months before the wedding, Darius began to change. He stayed late at work, texting at odd hours, blaming international clients. Our Friday date nights disappeared, replaced by urgent meetings. When he was home, he was distracted, glued to his phone, half listening when I spoke. Even worse, he started criticizing the very things he once adored. My laugh was suddenly too loud. My favorite dress washed me out, and my nightly reading habit kept him awake. Meanwhile, Odora started calling me more often, constantly asking about wedding plans. "I just want everything to be perfect for you," she'd say. She even offered to attend vendor meetings I couldn't make due to work. One Thursday, Darius and I went to dinner at a fancy Italian restaurant. He barely looked at me, giving curt replies. When his phone rang for the 5th time, I finally asked, "Is something more important going on?" "Just work stuff," he muttered, turning his phone face down. A few days later, while doing laundry, I smelled a strange perfume on his collar. Strong and floral, not mine. When I confronted him, he explained it away. He'd met a potential investor named Wendy Mills, who hugged him goodbye. It sounded believable enough, and I wanted to trust him. Still uneasy, I confided in Alina over coffee. "Every couple gets stressed before the wedding," she assured me. "Parker and I fought non-stop before ours. Now we're fine." But the knot in my stomach wouldn't ease. Even my mom noticed my tension during dinner. "You seem distracted, sweetheart. Wedding stress?" "Just last-minute details, Mom," I lied, smiling weakly. I tried harder to make things right. Booked a spa day, cooked his favorite meals, bought new lingerie. But he only grew more distant. Then came the cake-tasting appointment he'd been excited for. Yet that morning, he called to say he couldn't come due to a meeting. "Odora can go with you. She knows my preferences," he said casually. Something inside me sank. How did my sister know his preferences better than I did? The next day, while cleaning Darius's car before a dinner event, I found an earring stuck between the seat and console. A silver drop earring with a tiny sapphire. I knew it instantly. It belonged to Odora, our grandmother's gift, the same pair she'd worn at my engagement party. That evening, when I showed it to Darius, he didn't flinch. "Oh, she must have dropped it when I gave her a ride to the florist," he said calmly. "You never told me you drove her anywhere," I whispered. "Didn't I? Must have slipped my mind." When I called Odora, she gave the same story, word for word. Oh, thank goodness. I'd been looking for that. Darius kindly gave me a ride, since my car was in the shop. Their rehearsed tone made my skin crawl. I barely slept that night, haunted by doubts. My weight dropped, and dark circles shadowed my eyes. I secretly began therapy. 3 weeks before the wedding, Darius suggested we postpone. "You haven't been yourself, Wendy. Maybe we're rushing." I broke down, begging him to tell me what was wrong, but his eyes looked empty as he hugged me. One night, I woke up at 3 a.m. His side of the bed was cold. From the hallway, I heard his muffled whisper in the guest room. "Not now. She'll hear us. I know. Soon." The next morning, I decided to surprise him with lunch at his office. My dad called as I was leaving. "Wendy, are you eating well? Your mom says you've lost too much weight." "I'm fine, Dad. Just bringing Darius lunch." "Good," he said. "That man better be treating my daughter right." At Darius's office, The security guard smiled and waved me through. In the elevator, I checked my reflection, trying to hide the worry lines. The lunch bag carried his favorite sandwich. When I entered the reception, his assistant, Morel, looked startled. "Wendy, we weren't expecting you today." Her eyes darted toward Darius's closed office door. "He's in a meeting right now." "That's fine," I said. "I'll wait." But when I tried to walk past her, she stepped in front of me nervously. "Actually, he asked not to be disturbed." Her anxious tone made my stomach twist. "Is he alone in there, Morel?" I asked. Her silence said everything. Before she could stop me, I pushed open the office door, and my world collapsed. There was Darius, leaning against his desk, his hands on my sister's waist, her arms wrapped around his neck, locked in a kiss. For a few seconds, they didn't even notice me. I stood frozen, every breath cutting deeper than the last. Her skirt, his loosened tie, the way they held each other. It wasn't the first time. When the door clicked shut behind me, they finally turned. 3 stunned faces, 1 betrayal. "Wendy," Darius stammered, adjusting his tie, "this isn't what it looks like." Eudora didn't even try to lie. She lifted her chin and said coldly, "We didn't plan it. It just happened." And in that moment, all I could ask was, "How long?" Eudora looked at me, then back down. "Wendy, let's talk about this privately," she murmured. "How long?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. "For months," she admitted quietly. "Since the engagement party. Months. Almost half of our engagement. While I was choosing invitations and flowers, they were betraying me." Darius moved behind his desk, putting distance between us like he was preparing for a meeting. "I didn't plan this, Wendy. Feelings change sometimes. I was going to tell you later." "Later?" I asked sharply. "After what? The wedding? The honeymoon?" He spoke with that calm, polished tone he always used when handling difficult clients. The lunch bag slipped from my hands. "I trusted you both," I whispered. Eudora looked embarrassed. "It just happened, Becca. We tried to stop it." "Don't call me Becca." The nickname felt like another insult. "Nothing just happens. For 5 months, you made choices. Every secret message, every lie, every time you looked at me while knowing exactly what you were doing." Darius pressed his intercom. "Morel, come in, please." His assistant entered, avoiding my eyes. "Please escort Wendy out," Darius said evenly. "She's upset." "I can leave on my own," I said, trying to keep my pride, though I felt like collapsing inside. "You two deserve each other." In the elevator, tears finally came. Dot. He wrote that Eudora had helped catalog my remaining items. The betrayal ran deeper than I'd thought. Friends told me that the two of them had been meeting secretly whenever I worked late or traveled. Eudora had pursued him intentionally, making excuses to see him alone, sending texts and pictures while I wasn't around. Word of their affair spread quickly. Some people supported me. Others sided with Darius because of his influence. A few admitted they'd seen the flirting but didn't want to interfere. Their silence hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. Those months were the darkest of my life. My mother became my anchor, feeding me when I couldn't eat, listening to my tears, staying over when I couldn't face being alone. She tried to mediate between us, inviting Eudora and me to family dinners that always ended in tense silence or angry words. At one dinner, Eudora snapped when I refused to pass her the salt. "You always got everything first, Wendy," she said bitterly. "The grades, the job, the apartment. For once, I got something before you did." My fiancé wasn't something to win. I said, my voice shaking. He was the man I loved and trusted. My mother set her fork down. But Dora Marie Thompson, apologize to your sister. For what? For being honest? Darius chose me. He loves me now. I stood up, placing my napkin on the plate. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry, Mom. That was the last dinner I attended with Odora. The strain worsened my father's heart problems, leading to more doctor visits and medication changes. My mother seemed to age overnight, her face lined with worry as she tried to hold us together. 6 months after discovering the affair, I hit rock bottom. My therapist diagnosed me with depression and suggested medication. Work suffered. I couldn't concentrate and broke down crying during a client presentation. My boss suggested I take leave, but I knew staying in Boston, surrounded by painful reminders, would only make things worse. When a marketing director position opened in our Chicago branch, I applied immediately. The interview went smoothly. My desperation for a fresh start probably sounded like enthusiasm. 2 weeks later, I got the job. My mother helped me pack, wrapping my belongings with care. As we packed, she asked softly, "Will you ever forgive Odora?" I folded a sweater without looking up. "I don't know, Mom. Not now. Maybe not ever." "Forgiveness isn't about them deserving it," she said gently. "It's about freeing yourself." "I am freeing myself," I replied. "I'm moving to Chicago." She sat beside me, taking my hands. "Running away isn't healing, sweetheart." Tears filled my eyes. "I just need space to even start healing. Please understand that." She nodded and hugged me tightly. "Promise you'll call. Don't shut us out." I promise. Saying goodbye was harder than I thought. My father hugged me longer than usual. His voice cracked as he said, "Show them, kiddo. Build a life so good they'll choke on their regret." The nightmares about Darius and Odora slowly let up. In June, Zevian surprised me with a weekend in Michigan's wine country. We stayed at a charming bed and breakfast surrounded by rows of vines, spent afternoons tasting wine, and evenings watching the sun dip over Lake Michigan. For the first time in years, I felt truly present and content, freed from the heavy shadow of betrayal. On our last evening, walking through an early summer rose trellis at the Chicago Botanic Garden, Zevian stopped beneath the climbing blooms. He took both my hands. "Wendy," he said, "this past year knowing you has been the best thing that's happened to me." When he knelt and opened a small ring box, my heart lurched. For an instant, images of Darius's proposal threatened to crash in. But looking into Zevian's face, all I could read was sincerity. "I'm not asking for an answer now," he added, sensing my hesitation. "Whenever you're ready, tomorrow or next year, I'll be here." Tears filled my eyes, but they weren't of panic or pain. "Yes," I whispered, "I'm ready." The ring was nothing like Darius's flashy diamond. A simple emerald flanked by tiny diamonds, understated, delicate, like what we had. That night, I called my parents. Mother sobbed happy tears. "He sounds wonderful, darling. When can we meet him?" she asked. "Soon," I promised. We planned a small wedding for 30 guests at a historic venue in Chicago. At Mother's request, I invited Odora, more a gesture toward healing than an expectation she'd attend. Her reply by email was brisk. "Congratulations on the engagement, but Darius and I have other engagements that day. Best wishes." Mother was disappointed, but unsurprised. "Give her time," she told me. "This is progress compared to where you were." Our wedding day was intimate and joyful, with my parents, new friends, and Zevian's relatives present. Father walked me down the aisle, whispering, "I haven't seen you this happy in years." Zevian's vows reflected what we'd been through. He promised to remember that love is both strong and fragile, to care for it every day, and to be worthy of the trust I'd given him. We built a life together in Chicago, bought and renovated a brownstone, and our careers continued to grow. I rose to a vice presidential role. Zevian's investment firm expanded and began focusing on female-led technology startups. One evening at a business dinner, I overheard someone mention Darius. "Rowan?" they said. "Yeah, he and Forrester had that rivalry in angel investing about 7 years back. Forrester backed the startup that got acquired. Rowan backed the competitor and went bankrupt." Later, I asked Zevian about it. "I was going to tell you eventually," he admitted. "I knew who you were when we met at that conference. Not the details, but that you'd been engaged to Rowan." "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "I wanted you to know me for me," he said. I wasn't angry. Somehow the symmetry made sense. It felt fitting, not harmful. 2 years into our marriage, we tried to have a baby. Months passed with no success. Fertility specialists, difficult conversations, and repeated disappointments followed. Zevian was steady through each setback, holding me, reminding me that family can take many forms. Then came the worst news. Mother had cancer. We flew to Boston immediately, met with doctors, and helped guide my parents through treatment options. Mother fought hard, but the cancer was advanced. I took a leave from work to care for her and moved back to my childhood home. Zevian flew in every weekend to help me and to be with my increasingly frail father. In those last weeks, Mother and I spoke often about life, love, and family. Once, while I adjusted her pillow, she said softly that she wished Odora and I could find peace with each other. "Life is too short," she murmured. I promised to try, for myself, and, if only a little, for her. 3 days later, she died, with Zevian, Father, and me at her side. The first straight conversation between Odora and me came the moment I reached out after the funeral. "Mom's gone," I said when she answered. Her breath caught. Then, "I'll be there in an hour," she said, voice breaking. We met at our parents' house and exchanged short, awkward hugs before turning to funeral arrangements. The real test would be at the service, where years of hurt would confront fresh grief and Mother's final wish. The burial morning was gray and drizzling. Standing in my childhood bedroom in a black dress, I wondered how I'd get through the day. Zevian stood behind me, hands on my shoulders. "I'm right beside you today," he whispered. Downstairs, Father sat staring at untouched coffee, hollowed by the last week. He looked 10 years older. At the funeral home, the room filled quickly with extended family and old friends. I stayed near Father, accepting condolences with practiced politeness. Cousins from California, Mother's college friends, neighbors, faces from a decades-long life crowded the room. "You look just like Laura did," my great-aunt said, stroking my cheek. I didn't mention why I'd moved to Chicago. Instead, I helped Father into the front row. Zevian took the opposite side. A murmur ran through the crowd when Odora and Darius arrived. Odora wore an elegant black dress and diamond earrings. Darius looked uncomfortable, but had his arm around her. Her huge engagement ring and wedding band were impossible to miss. Father stiffened beside me. Odora hugged him awkwardly. Darius offered a polite condolence. When Zevian moved to speak with the funeral director, I was left alone with them. Odora asked to speak in a side room. I followed, trying to avoid a scene beside Mother's casket. In the quiet, she observed that I looked thin. Then she said brusquely that she and Darius had bought a summer house on Cape Cod and were doing fine. "Poor you, still alone at 38, she said. Once words like that would have crushed me. Now they landed like something sad and tired. I smiled genuinely and introduced her to Zevian, who'd stepped near. "Come meet my sister," I said. Seeing Zevian and Darius together drained the color from Darius's face. "Forrester," he murmured, and Zevian's reply was cool and professional. The two once rivals, now across a very different divide. Darius tried to suggest collaborating. Zevian offered only the polite option of contacting his office. When the funeral director called us back, the room buzzed with the business world connection between the men. During the service, Father suddenly gripped his chest. "Dad!" I cried as Zevian called for help. We moved him to a private room. A doctor among the guests suggested stress, not another heart attack. Adora followed us, genuinely concerned. For 20 minutes, we sat in stunned silence, bound together only by worry for Father. He insisted on continuing, and the brief crisis produced an uneasy truce. I gave a eulogy about Mother's kindness and steadiness. When Adora spoke after me, she faltered but finished, sharing childhood memories that drew tears and light laughter. As we put Mother to rest, it began to rain gently. At the reception, Darius drank heavily and kept looking at his watch. Adora stayed by Father's side with a softer expression. I overheard rumors of Darius's business troubles and wondered if Adora's earlier bravado had been a mask. The day after the funeral, Zevian had an important meeting and asked if he should stay. I told him Father needed help sorting Mother's things and that I'd remain a few days. Left alone, Father sat in Mother's garden looking through photo albums she had carefully labeled. I began the painful task of going through her closets, each dress a memory. In her nightstand, I found Mother's leather-bound journal. She'd written to her daughters for years about her wish for our reconciliation. The final entry, only 2 weeks before she died, read that her greatest regret was leaving with her girls still estranged. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rang. Adora stood on the porch alone. There was no sign of Darius. Inside, she sat at the kitchen table, smaller without him, and said, "I'm sorry about yesterday. What I said, it was cruel." Then she told me she'd read Mother's journal. Reconciliation, she admitted, required more than presence. It would need truth. She began to speak in a voice raw with confession. She was miserable. Darius had changed after their marriage, becoming controlling and critical. His business had been failing. The lifestyle had been a facade propped up by debt. "He monitors my spending, checks my phone, questions my every move," she said. "Why stay?" I asked. "Shame," she answered. "How could I admit what I'd done, that I destroyed our family?" She had been living with a prenup and the fear of leaving with nothing. I put Mother's journal on the table and asked her to read. As Adora read, she sobbed and finally said she intended to leave Darius and had already been consulting a lawyer. I felt a complicated mixture of vindication and tenderness. The sister who had hurt me was finally facing consequences. And she didn't ask for forgiveness. She only wanted to tell the truth before blowing her life up again. We spent hours going through Mother's things, trading memories, how she taught us to bake and left different notes in our lunchboxes, how she never mixed our cookie batches because I liked chocolate chip and Adora preferred sugar cookies. There was no instant reconciliation. The wounds were deep. But as dusk fell, a fragile bridge formed between us on the foundation of Mother's love. Before she left, Odora said she'd file for divorce when the timing was right and planned to move into a small apartment and start over. "What about you?" she asked. "Will you go back to Chicago?" I told her my life with Zevian was there. "You seem happy," she said. "One of us should be." We hugged. Awkward, short, but real. It wasn't forgiveness yet, only a beginning. Back in Chicago, life settled into a new rhythm. 6 months after Mother died, I discovered I was pregnant. The joy was shaded by a poignant awareness that Mother wouldn't meet her grandchild. But I felt her presence in quiet, peaceful moments. Odora and I stayed in careful touch by phone. She filed for divorce and moved into a modest apartment, taking a job at a small marketing agency. Boston's gossip circles were cruel, but she seemed determined to rebuild honestly. Looking back, the path that led me here wasn't one I would have chosen. Losing Darius had felt like the end, but it turned out to be the start of something better. With Zevian, I found partnership, respect, and steady support. His success never eclipsed mine. It complemented it. Mother had been right. Forgiveness is for the one who forgives, not for the forgiven. Over time, the weight of anger lifted and allowed me to see my past without being defined by it. Sitting in our soon-to-be nursery while Zevian painted the walls a soothing green, I thought about what I would teach our child. How loss can lead to discovery, how endings open space for new beginnings, and how the hardest experiences often point us toward our true path. My life had become more authentic and richer than I could have imagined in those dark days 6 years before. Not because of the betrayal itself, but because it pushed me to rebuild with clearer purpose and deeper understanding.